Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dr. Quack Show. I got another top 10 here, big top 10, because, we were doing a lot on wrestlers. And, this time I thought, let's do it for managers here. Believe me, managers had a great role in professional wrestling. Managers were ones that were able to, draw the heat on people, were able to, keep the heat with the fans, keep them riled up. And they were also able to be the ones that were the talkers. Without them, a lot of these guys would just be wrestlers and they wouldn't have no mouthpiece. Because a lot of guys in those days couldn't exactly cut promos, like their managers could. So, let me go here with my top 10 here. Number 10, what I got here. I got number 10, that would be to me, and in this list, you can interchange this any way you want, but this is just me. Number 10, I'm going to put Classy Freddie Blassie. Classy Freddie Blassie was a legendary wrestler from the 30s. The fashion plate there. The guy was a legend. He was there for a long time. He managed a lot of guys. Just a few notes I got here. He managed, Jesse Ventura, George the Animal Steel was pretty big. He even managed Hulk Hogan, at one point. He managed a lot of guys, was one of the greatest talkers in the business. He was definitely there and one of the best to watch. If you're old school, this would be one of the guys you probably watched back in the days. You pencil neck geek. Yeah, it was classic, man. I'm telling you, even had a song with it. That would be my number 10. Number 9, right? And a lot of this has to also not only draw heat, but this also has to do with being able to, keep towards the top and make their men money. So a lot of this came there. Number 9, Miss Elizabeth. I put her up there at number 9. Now, Miss Elizabeth, you figure from the time of WrestleMania 1, till about, let's just say, WrestleMania 6, 7, she was involved in a lot of the upper mainstream of the WWE. I mean, especially with Randy Savage. Randy Savage had a great career. She managed him well. She played her role very well. The damsel in distress here. I mean, she did a great job. She was involved in the big feud with Hogan and Savage, with 4 and 5, WrestleMania 4 and 5. So, I mean, I think she did her part. She was, the first real female manager out there that, would kind of help her man win. She came out there in some cases and distracted guys and got victories. So I would put her at number 8. I mean, there's definitely a lot more people ahead of this, but I think she deserves her recognition on this. Number 8, Captain Lou Albano. Captain Lou was legendary to me. He was definitely awesome. I mean, it's even funny. He was even part of the Mario Brothers Super Show. But as far as his tag team management career, he managed a lot of teams. He had a lot of championships. I want to say it was somewhere near the 20s, if I'm not mistaken. I know he managed a lot of teams. He definitely, he managed the Bulldogs. He managed the Headstringers. He managed the Blackjacks. He managed the Moondogs. That's an old team from back in the days. But he managed a lot of teams to titles. And he could talk. And believe me, I mean, he was even in Cyndi Lauper's video, which is pretty awesome, wasn't it? So, I mean, yeah, I would put him at number 8. Number 7, I would put Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart was phenomenal. All these managers here were definitely good for their times. Like I said, it's hard to interchange these because, someone want to put higher, and then again, I'm like, okay, who am I going to take out of here? It's a difficult list. But Jimmy Hart. I mean, Jimmy Hart there, he managed back in the days the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, the Honky Tonk Man. He managed Earthquake and Typhoon, the Natural Disasters, the Nasty Boys, Money Inc. I mean, he managed a lot of people, which is kind of funny. This reminds me because when they all were bidding on the Macho Man for Elizabeth was his official manager. He was one of the guys with Freddie Blassie and a few others who I'll mention here later. But yeah, they were all there, and Jimmy Hart had his spot. He even managed Hogan in WCW to a title. So I mean, he was a manager of champions there in some respects. So number 6, and they not necessarily quality and quantity of managers. It's quality at times, and this manager here managed a tag team to pretty much every title in every organization, from the NWA to the AWA to the WWF to the WCW, you know. And that would be Precious Paul Ellering. He had a lot of influence on there with the Road Warriors, you know, Hawk and Animal. Two of the legitimate toughest guys in the world. Could be arguably one of the toughest tag teams in the world and one of the best for sure. But yeah, he had a lot of influence in that. I mean, he did manage other guys. He did have his hands on King Kong Bundy. He had Jake Roberts. You know, I mean, he had a bunch of guys, but his big claim to fame was the Road Warriors. And, I mean, Road Warriors definitely, a lot of people would argue they're one of the best out there in the world as far as tag team wrestling ever has been. Number five. I'm going to go with Mr. Fuji. I mean, Mr. Fuji was one of the best talkers, too. He was really, all these guys were great talkers. That's why they stayed in the business so long. But, I mean, Mr. Fuji there, he managed Don the Rock Morocco for a while. He managed Yokozuna to a championship. He had, you know, the Orient Express. He had a bunch of guys out there. But the big thing was he knew how to keep the heat. He was a great wrestler himself, you know, winning tag team titles. But, and Demolition, can't forget that. He did manage Demolition and Warlord and Barbarian in that whole, you know, stint there where they had their rivalry. So he did a lot there. I really, you know, I thought he was funny. You know, he always wore the hat there and had the cane with him. Until Yokozuna, then he dressed in the robe and throws salt and paste. You know, he was the heel. He would rile fans up, and he would make sure his man won. So that's why I put him there. Number four, Gary Hart. Gary Hart, you know, a lot of guys, you know, they're recognized from the E. This guy was more recognized from, you know, his time with World Class and GWF, Global Wrestling Federation, USWA, I believe, there too. I mean, and of course the NWA, because he had a huge stable. I mean, he would just manage anybody and everybody, no matter who it was. It was always him versus like the Freebirds in World Class. I mean, it was a big thing. I believe he was one of the better managers. He didn't, to my knowledge, have any major championships, but from what I understand, I mean, world title is what I'm referring to. But from what I know, I mean, he got his guys over. He made them money. I really feel like he did a great job. And to my knowledge, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was the one that discovered King Kong Bundy, if I'm not shocked there, when Bundy was working at a nightclub. So, yeah, definitely, you know, I think he belongs on that list. Number three, right there. Going to go to J.J. Dillon. I mean, Four Horsemen. That's all I really got to say there. I mean, he managed Ric Flair. He managed Arn and Ole when they were a team. Then it was Arn and Tully, you know, as the tag team champions. Tully was a great television champion. Barry Windham was a part of that. You know, I think Sid Vicious was at one point. He managed a lot of guys, and he knew how to hold the gold throughout the 80s in the NWA. I mean, he later became, you know, an executive for Vince and, you know, has done a lot of things like that. But his managerial career, you know, one of the best in the world, you know, really felt that he did a good job with what he had to do. You know, one of the better guys definitely in this business as far as managers. If you ever want to become a manager, this is one of the guys to watch. My two ahead of him, and like I said, with this list here, it's totally interchangeable. You could flip this with 3, you could flip this up to 1 if you wanted to in some cases. Well, I don't know about 1. I think 1's ahead of everybody. I'll get that to in a sec. But number two, I have Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette is arguably one of the best managers out there. I mean, he knew how to draw heat. He was very smart with it. The Midnight Express. I mean, Midnight Express, you know, Sweet Stan Lane over there and Beautiful Bobby, you know, one of the great tag teams. He had Big Bubba Rogers for a while. You know, he managed Yoko. He was there with Mr. Fuji combined there, you know, managing and being his interpreter, but, you know, doing one hell of a job. You know, one of the best, you know, in the business there. And a lot of people will tell you, even to this day, one of the greatest minds in the business. Probably, you know, the smartest man when it comes to the wrestling business, I would say, is Jim Cornette. Just my opinion. You know. And number one, Bobby the Brain Heenan. God, it's really, it's kind of sad if you when you see him now versus where he was when he was, in the 80s. And he was a big part of the 80s. I mean, he had Bundy, he had Stud, he had Andre, he had Rick Rude, he had Mr. Perfect. He had stables of guys. I mean, and Bobby was funny. Anybody will tell you that's ever met him, he was definitely a jokester. He would always cut up. That's what made him, really appealing to the fans. And they always wanted to see him get his butt kicked too, because he would interfere in matches. I mean, who can forget when the Ultimate Warrior got his redemption, over there, and him wearing the Weasel suit. Always calling him the Brain, but they would call him the Weasel. And probably, the greatest commentary team, in my opinion, was him and Gorilla Monsoon. So, I mean, that's a tight one there. Gorilla Monsoon was one of my favorites to listen to when I was a kid. But Bobby the Brain as a whole, was a great manager, And here's some side note on this. He was the first one to really point out Hulk Hogan was going to turn heel. Well before Hulk Hogan turned heel in the NWO. I mean, he kept saying it and everybody blew him off. But, yeah, he was right when it happened. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, one of the greatest managers. I think he's head and shoulders above everybody. It's just, and this is, like I said, it's a hard list. Some people are going to go with some other people. I want to hear that. I want to hear some names. If you got some names that you feel, belong on this list, or some of these names that don't belong on this list. There's a lot of them out there as far as managers. Definitely let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Kind of curious on your thoughts more than mine. This is my list here. I spent about a good hour, taking a look at this and thinking about it, because I know a lot of these names here, and just putting who over who is really the difficult part, So thanks for tuning in. Let me know what you think, and if you can, subscribe to my channel. That would be awesome. I would definitely like some subscribers here. I mean, it kind of sucks when you'd only see it at a low number, but people are watching. I'm glad. So if you're watching, can you do that for me? That's all I'm asking. All right, guys, have a good night.